welcome everyone for joining us on this beautiful Wednesday morning, as we are just a day before the holiday of Shavuot. Tomorrow night begins this incredible holiday. In the Talmud it says, one of the great sages, his name is Rabbi Yossi, and he says, Ilav hayom dekagarim kama Yosef ika beshuka. If not for this day that made me who I am, how many other Joes are there in the marketplace? What he was saying is, what separates me from the bunch is the fact that we have a Torah and that we have mitzvot and that we are a light unto the nations, which is actually the mandate we were given as God gave us the Torah, was to not just work on our own spiritual oasis. Quite the contrary. If that was our whole purpose, God would have made us angels, because that's what angels do. They work on singing and praising and their relationship with Hashem. Our job is working on our relationship with Hashem, but we do that by doing what Hashem asks from us, which is being there for others and being a light unto the nations, illuminating, brightening, and showing that this, what at times can look like a world of a jungle, in fact is God's beautiful garden. For those that had a chance last night, we watched this most incredible hour-long tribute and video of inspiration. We called it Unlocking Potential. And it was a video of the impact that the Rebbe has globally, the impact the Rebbe has individually on each person, and obviously the impact the Rebbe had right here in Northern California with all the different Chabad rabbis. So it was definitely an inspirational evening. Thomas, I enjoyed your feedback, and Isabel as well, and Maddie as well. We got some very nice feedback from last night's thing. So it's a great time. Ooh, and I think I see Vivian joining. Okay, Vivian, I think you're in now. Okay, so just a quick summary. Today at 12, we're giving our weekly Yiddish class. We're continuing on that. Tomorrow evening begins the holiday of Shavuot, like I mentioned. Before Shavuot, at 7 o'clock, we will tune in together to say L'chaim, even though it's not Erev Shabbat, but it's Erev Shavuot. So tomorrow, Thursday, before sundown at 7 o'clock, we will, you're welcome to join us right here at our Zoom classroom, where we will welcome in this beautiful, powerful, and most essential day of the year. We're all talking about what's essential in life, and Torah is essential. And while our physical doors will open at the right time, the essential part is actually what we do in our hearts and what we do in our homes to welcome in Judaism and to welcome God in. And that we do especially on Shavuot. So for those who would like, we'll have by our home, we're printing a bunch of really nice community guides. We're printing them at Office Depot, so we're not even going to be touching them. They'll be in envelopes, and you're welcome to pick them up from outside of our home. It'll give you full instructions and great reading material to understand what Shavuot is about, how to celebrate it at home, and how to understand the Ten Commandments on a more palatable, deeper, and meaningful level. Okay, and let's begin. So we're learning chapter 13. We just concluded a beautiful chapter of 12. It took us several weeks to dig into it properly, but I think we did a pretty good job of analyzing it, understanding it, dissecting it, and applying it in our day-to-day. So I'd like to go on to chapter 13. What I decided to do, I figured out a little bit of technology that is not my forte, but there's something called Kindle, and there's something called Amazon. So through Kindle, I was able to purchase the book Practical Tanya, which is what we're using for the class, which is this one over here. I was able to purchase it as a online version. So when we read the text inside, for those who don't have the book with them, you're able to actually follow along the text on the screen. That works for some. It's harder for others. I teach once a week 7th and 8th grade boys now on Zoom, but the school is in the city, and I find that they are actually very good at learning on a screen. They could read text. It could be small text, big text. Really makes a difference. They soak it up, and I find maybe for me, I don't know if you have this, I learn better when it's literally a piece of paper, and I could turn the pages and I could focus on it more. But for those that it may be helpful for, I have a Kindle version of the Tanya, and I'll put that up on the screen as we're going to be learning it inside, so that you can follow along the actual text. that will be displayed on our screen. But before that, let's just see where we're up to in chapter 13, how the Tanya and the Alter Rebbe, how we got to this place. Inside, it's going to be on page 152. But just giving a peek into the chapter from an outside view, what we know so far is we have a tzaddik, we have a rasha, and we have a Beinoni. The way Tanya is describing it, and I'll focus on this a little bit, Tanya is describing the tzaddik, not simply a good guy or a righteous person. It's a very vague term. The way that Tanya understands the term tzaddik, it's more of an inspired person. It's someone who is always on a spiritual high, who's always divinely intuitive, and that's his only focus and desire and connection. He doesn't, and therefore, because of this passion and inspiration for God, he doesn't make mistakes because he doesn't have any other wants or temptations. Doesn't apply to most of us. There's actually at the end in chapter 14, there's a beautiful line that we'll get to in a couple weeks, how it describes how we all have tzaddik moments. But for the most part, and for most of us, we are not on that tzaddik capacity to not have any other wants and desires and temptations and thoughts and reactions that are ungodly. Most of us don't really resonate with that. For the tzaddik, it never becomes a drag to keep kosher, to pray. It's what they want to do all day. It's all that their sole occupation. Soul, S-O-L-E, but also soul, S-O-U-L, because it's their only, that's the only soul that talks to them. It's the godly soul that's in charge. It won the battle, even if it maybe perhaps never even had a battle, depending on what category of tzaddik. On the other extreme, we introduced the rasha. The rasha literally is a wicked, but the way we're understanding it from the Kabbalistic, mystical dimension, the rasha is it's not a wicked person, it's a weak person. He's not inspired. He's compromised. He doesn't have any passion in Torah, doesn't have any passion in God. And therefore, there's times when he's weak. I mean, not times. There's times when he gives in and times that he doesn't. But the main agenda is he's weak. So therefore, I may give in today or I may give in tomorrow, but he's going to be giving in at some point. And just because he's weak, it's not a negative thing. It's something he has to work on. He has to work on his discipline. So we're not accusing him in the Tanya of being a horrible person, because most of us relate with this category of weakness. We all have weakness. We all have flaws. Now, it's what we're doing with them. Are we working on becoming better? Or are we just waiting for the next time that we're going to slip again? A rasha doesn't have the discipline. He doesn't want it to happen, but he's just so weak. It's hard for him to stop it. The Beinoni is not as inspired as the tzaddik. He's somewhere in between. That's why the name of the book, the way the Alter Rebbe calls it, he called the book, you'll see it on the front page, the book of the Beinoni. The book of the in-betweener is how we translate the Beinoni here, because he's not the tzaddik, but he's not the rasha. He's not on either side. He's in between them. He's not as inspired as the tzaddik. He has other wants and desires, but he's not as weak and as compromised as the rasha. We explained the Beinoni to be a moody guy, to be a person that has mood swings. And we all have that. There's sometimes when we're inspired and sometimes when we're not. So his inspiration doesn't stick like the tzaddik's. He changes. His day changes. So Maddie, you're asking a great question. The addict, it's a good question. An addict that is, an addict needs therapy. An addict needs intervention beyond the Tanya. Not because the Tanya can't help him, but because either they need a support system that is beyond the book. So you could practice what the Tanya is saying, but you need that outer strength to pick the person up. The way the Talmud actually words it is ein chavush mater atzmai, which means a person in shackles, a person in prison, a person in chains can't undo their chains, can't free themselves. They need someone from the outside to take them out of their chains. So a person who's chained up, which is an addict, that they're in a place that they're so stuck, they need someone to lift them out, to lift them up. So it's not that the Tanya can't help them, is that I will be the first to tell you that that person needs intervention from a medical standpoint, from a psychological standpoint. Of course, they could use the methods of the Tanya to get them on track and to keep them on track, but they need that intervention that is professional in terms. If we're talking about an addict that is just addicted to coffee or chocolate or something that is not out of the norm, a person could be addicted to shopping. But if it's within reason, if it's within the norms of addiction, we all have addictions. Some of them are just too severe and dangerous, and therefore you need more medical help. And let's say substance abuse, etc. And for some, depending on the addiction, Tanya is able to start off to help with. But so it's a very good question. You're welcome. So we said the Beinani, there's times when he's like a king. A king is someone who's loved by the people, ideally. The king is someone who is in control, but not out of force. It's because he loves what he does, and people love him. They love him being their king or queen. That's the Beinani during the time of prayer. Prayer is a time of just absolute inspiration. He's on a high. His prayer is the inspiration that the tzaddik feels all day. The Beinani has during prayer. But another time of day, the Beinani, we said, is like a dictator, which means he's forcing himself to do it. He's not inspired anymore. He's just keeping it going, but almost, in Yiddish, the term is kvetched to do it. He's squeezed. So the time of prayer, like we gave the example, is time like he's surfing. He's on a high. He loves it. He can't imagine being anywhere else. He loves where he is. But then the wave disappears, and he's waiting for the next wave. And during that time, he's kind of bored and kind of contemplating, should I go back to shore? I think it's called the crest. During that time, he's vulnerable, and he's, I wouldn't say weak, but there's sharks that are coming up and trying to catch him. So that's the Beinani, not during prayer time. That's when the Yetzer Hara, which is that evil inclination, that voice of the animal soul, trying to get his attention, and is the first waiting for him outside of the synagogue, like I said, and trying to distract him and trying to get him to trip up. And another example we said is like the Beinani is like the poor person who is heating up his house in the morning and hoping that that fuel, the logs that he puts in the morning lasts all day. So it's like the residual effect. Let me just see what you're saying. Where are you? Durma verse. What this says. 151. Oh, about Joseph and his brothers. So Shira is asking, what we explained at the end of last week was about, sorry about that. Some coffee always helps clears the throat. L'chaim. So I'm not sure what you mean, but the discrepancy. But what we explained before is that on one hand, we have to be realizing that nothing that comes to us is happening on its own. It's because it's something that Hashem knows is best for us. So the person handling it, the person handing it over to us, is not really the one to blame. It's coming from Hashem. Maybe I'll address your question a little more as we read it inside. I think we'll get to there. Maybe, sure, I'll wait on that for a little bit. Okay, so now that we understand the Beinani, the Tzaddik, and of course the Rasha, Hillel Paracher was one of the top Chassidim. Like if you want to have stars amongst the Chassidim going through the ages of a 300-year Chassidus, starting with the Baal Shem Tov from the 1700s, and when the Tanya was printed in the 1790s, so going over 220 years, one of the greatest Chassidim. Some people say he was even like a half a Rebbe. He was a Chassid of 3 of the Rebbes, but he wrote his own books. He was a giant of Torah and of Chassidism, of course. His name was Rabbi Hillel Paracher. And this Hillel Paracher, he became a Chassid. And that's how it worked in the old days. I was born into the Chassidus. My parents already became Chassidim through learning the book of the Tanya and being inspired before I was born, but in the olden days, there was no such thing as Hasidism. So when the Tanya book was printed, many people started learning it and became Hasidim. So this giant of Torah, his name was Hillel Paratri. He was very young, but he became a Chassid. He went to the Alter Rebbe and to his son, the Mittler Rebbe, and to his son-in-law, the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe, who died in the 1860s. And he would say, before I became a Chassid, I thought I was a tzaddik. I had it all. Once I learned Tanya and I followed the ways of Hasidism, I just wish I could be a Beinani. He realized, because the point of what I'm sharing in that story is that the description of a tzaddik and a rasha and a Beinani, the way we're understanding it through Tanya, is all different than the way we understand it from the Talmud. The way it is in halacha, in Jewish law, a tzaddik is a person who goes to court and he's found to be innocent. It's not that he didn't do anything wrong, but he just can't be proven guilty. So it's like someone who has 51% merit. You know, in the ingredients, if there's less than a certain amount, they don't have to put it in the ingredients. So he has bad stuff going on, but he's 51% meritorious, and therefore he's called a tzaddik in court. That's how the Talmud would rule him. Someone who's 49% meritorious and 51% on the wicked side, sinful side, he would be called a rasha. Someone who's 50-50, balanced in the middle, they're Beinani, they're hovering in between. But the way we're understanding from the Zohar, which is the foundational book of Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism and spiritual insights and study, we're understanding the way we're quoting it in Tanya is, even though it's from the Zohar, it was never really spoken about and it was never really understood. The Tanya, the author, he's in his humility, he's crediting the Zohar and crediting other sources, but really he's the one revolutionizing these ideas from the 1700s. And he's saying the way we're understanding it here is that a rasha is someone who even sins once. It's not the quantity or the amount of how many sins or even what he's sitting on. It's just that he's compromised and he's weak. And he's ready to give into it today or tomorrow, whatever. The tzaddik is someone who's so inspired he'll never sin. And the Beinani is one that's struggling, meaning he has these temptations, but he's working on controlling himself. And the main theme of chapter 12 was, how do we control? How do we attain self-mastery? Mastery of self. The mind controls our heart. I won't get into it now. You can follow the recordings. I think we gave 4 classes on chapter 12. But now what we're going to do in chapter 13 is we're going to revisit chapter 1. And it's okay if you're like, oh, I wasn't here for chapter 1. And or even if you were here, but it was literally in November, so it's quite a while ago. Have no fear. We'll review some of the questions. And the way the Tanya is based, the first half of the first chapter, the first page and a half, was just like almost like a Talmudic thesis. It's showing you contradictions and discrepancies between one Mishnah and another source of the Talmud, and between a statement of an author of the Talmud, etc. So in chapter 13, now that we have a full description of the Tzaddik Rasha Beinani, chapter 13 now answers these questions. And really that was actually a big theme of the first of the Alter Rebbe, Reb Shneir Zalman, the author of the Tanya. And actually his name, I say his name always very quickly. His name was Shneor. That was his name. Shneor means, that was his name. Have friends named after him, of course. Shneir Zalman was his name. Literally, the word Shneor, it comes from 2 Hebrew words, Shnei and Or. Shnei means 2, Or means lights. He was the illuminator of 2 lights. There's the light of Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalistic dimension of Torah. And there's the light of the more Talmudic dimension of Torah. Talmudic dimension is what's revealed and understood, and Jewish law, the Agadaic, which is the stories of the Talmud, the Talmudic insights, expounding law. All that is the revealed aspect of the Torah. That was given over by Sinai very openly by Moshe. And but another part of the Torah that was given over, but just kept much more secretive, is the Kabbalistic dimension of the Torah. Now, people have studied both, but either you mainly focus on one, on the Talmudic dimension, this is what we do on Shabbos, and this is how we do it, and this is when we do it, and this is what we eat, for example, kosher, etc. Or we understand, we focus more on the mindfulness behind it, the soul behind it, the reason why we do it, the parts of God that we're connecting with, so to speak, when we fulfill a mitzvah, etc. Those are two dimensions. What the Alter Rebbe did, and this was something very novel, like his name represents, Shnei Or, two lights, he actually merges the two dimensions. He takes the Hasidic and mystical dimensions of Kabbalah to explain the basic laws, and he illuminates one with the other, meaning they're all blended into one beautiful chalent. It's not two separate categories, it's all one. So in the Tanya, he's doing that. He starts with Talmudic sources, but he's using the Kabbalistic dimensions of Torah to now give us a better understanding and answering these questions that we would have in the Talmud. So he's reconciling Talmud through mysticism. I hope that makes sense. So let's see what some of the questions were. Let me just double check. No questions. Okay. So now we'll resolve original questions. In chapter 1, we said that the tzaddik let's just see inside. Yeah, I don't know if we'll get to the text inside if I keep it up this way. Let's start with the first question answering, and then we'll see it inside. In the first chapter, one of the quotes we had from the Talmud is tzaddik, by the righteous person. The Yetzer Tov, his godly soul, his good inclination, is judging him, meaning is in control of him. By the Rasha, he's being governed and judged by his Yetzer Hara, by his negative voice, his evil inclination, his animal soul. But the Beinoni is being judged by both. So what is it? We couldn't understand, what does it mean the Beinoni is being judged by both? You could either be judged by one or the other. How could you be judged by both? So what we said is, there's times that the Beinoni, now it almost seems very clear. But originally we had a question, what does that mean? And now we're understanding, based on the description of the Beinoni, we're understanding that the Beinoni is being judged by both, which means in one day he has parts of his day that is godly soul is feeding him his voice, and at the same time he also has his negative soul telling him, his animal soul telling him what to do and who to lash out at, and to have ego and selfishness and anger and jealousy, etc. But those are only two judges. In truth, in Jewish court, we don't have this in our secular court. We have one judge, or we have a jury of 12. But in Jewish court, we actually are judged by 3 judges. The reason why there's 3 is because you always follow the majority. So you can't have a court of 2. You have to have a court of 3. 3 is you follow the majority of 2 versus 1. Either it's an unanimous of 3, or if there's a majority, it goes that way. So the way we're understanding it now is the Beinoni is being judged by both of these voices, his godly and his animal soul. But the judging over here, what's beautiful is there's a third judge, and that's the person themselves. The person themselves are their judge to tip the scale, to be controlled by the proper side, to follow the proper path. And the beautiful message over here, and is going to be in chapter 13, is you can do it. It's already innately ingrained in your soul capacity to you have both sides. You have the godly voice judging you, you have the animal voice looking to judge you and tell you what to do, which is what a judge would do. You have to follow what the judge says, but there's only 2 voices there. The third voice is you, and you're the arbitrator, kind of telling you to follow the path. And the point of chapter 12 was that you have that control to follow that path. You have the mastery of self and discipline to listen to the right side. And it says in the Torah, Adam, if you sanctify yourself a little bit, you work on it, Hashem will sanctify you a lot. A few years ago on Yom Kippur, I always share different thoughts and of course my sermon and different messages throughout services to keep it flowing and to keep it inspiring. And one of the things that just came to mind, and it wasn't even something I had to think deeply, it was just a text from the Torah, but people resonated with that message after. I got a lot of feedback where it says, God asks each person, Pischeli kechudesh al machat. I want you to open up just a little bit, open yourself up the size of the eye of a needle, tiny amount. But you start the process, and Hashem says, V'ani eftach lachem kepischei shel ulam. I'll open up for you like the entrance ways of the temple, the gateways to the temple, which was massive. Which means you start the process, and Hashem is there to cheer you on, lead you through, open up opportunities for you. But Hashem is ready to support you, but He needs our effort involved in it. So the Beinani, what we're being told over here is that you have that power, and you just put in that effort and put in that control, and Hashem will guide us along that path. And we are certain that Hashem promises us that you will succeed in this because Hashem supports it. Hashem says, just start it off, and I'll see to it to open up incredible opportunities. And just from another note, if we don't succeed, it's because we didn't fully put ourselves into it. It says in the Talmud, and we teach this to our children. Anyone who knows any Chabadnik, we teach our 12 foundational verses from the Torah. Now, the Rebbe culled from the entire verses of the Torah, I don't even know how many there are total. If you take the entire Tanakh and all the statements, especially from the Talmud, our Rebbe took for us in the 1980s, he started a campaign of Jewish children joining God's army. It was called Tzivos Hashem. My children are in it. They rise in ranks, they get promoted as they do more mitzvahs from private to colonel and captain and lieutenant and sergeant and general, etc. My Yassi actually just attained the rank of general last week. And the Rebbe started this army. And as the charging mission, he chose 12 verses that this army recites all the time. So my children know these verses by heart. In our summer camp that we usually have, and unfortunately it doesn't seem like we'll be doing it this year, but in our summer camp, even the children of our community, they say these verses. One of the most precious verses is Yagaita umatzasa tamen, which means if a person comes to you and says, I've tried, but I haven't succeeded, don't believe them. If someone says, I haven't tried, but I still found success, don't believe them. But if someone says, I've tried and I've succeeded, you should believe them. Because even if they succeeded, they feel that they didn't have to try, but they still succeeded, that wasn't really success. You have to really put in the effort. And on the other hand, if someone really does put in the effort, it's impossible that they're not going to be successful. One follows the other. It's just the way Hashem sets it up. And if you didn't succeed, it's because you have to try harder. You have to revisit it and work deeper on making it happen. So having said that, how did I bring this in? Oh, so the Beinani, if they truly try on self-discipline, on mastering self, on controlling themselves, etc., they can do it. And because I'm not going to revisit chapter 12 fully, but we have that inside. Okay, so just one more part. Maybe I would love to visit it inside, but let's see a little more. We said that the neshama, this was again in chapter 1, one of the things we learned, let me just answer Manny's question. Thank you for the compliments. Can you say that once again, can you say that one again about trying and succeeding? Yeah. In Hebrew, I'll say it in Hebrew. My kids could tell it to you backwards. It's Yagaita v'loy matzasa al tam. And if someone says, I've tried and I haven't succeeded, don't believe them. If someone says, I haven't even tried, but I've succeeded, don't believe them. If someone says, I've tried and I've succeeded, you should believe them. Meaning the only way you'll truly find success is if you try. And if you didn't try, you didn't really truly find success. But if you did try and you really authentically tried and put in your absolute effort and you did everything in your capability, you are determined you will see success from it. It's a very powerful line. There's a lot more to talk about on it. But yeah, we'll stick to the Tanya. But my teachers have a lot of, and the Rebbe analyzes that and explains why that's such a foundational verse. But we'll suffice it over there for now. So another question that we're answering now in chapter 13 through our description of the Tzaddik, the Rasha, and the Beinani is that we say that a Tzaddik, Perak Av Tanya, let me just find the words in Hebrew. This is the opening line of the Tanya. It says, Mashpiyan Oisai, Tihi Tzaddik, V'al Tihi Rasha. we make the tzaddik, we make the soul, before they even descend into this world, we make the soul swear, take an oath, you're going to be a tzaddik, don't be a rasha. You be a tzaddik, don't be a rasha. And then, in another Mishnah it says, even if the whole world is saying, you are such a tzaddik, you should look at yourself as a rasha. So make up your mind. We're told, made an oath, don't be a rasha, be a tzaddik. On the other hand, we're said, you should consider yourself to be a rasha. Also, what does it mean, be a tzaddik and don't be a rasha? Say one or the other. Okay, let me get to that question in a second. So let's just analyze this one. What does it mean? It says, Tihi tzaddik, or Yihi beinecha karasha. Even if the whole world is saying you're a tzaddik, you should look at yourself in your own eyes, look in the mirror, and say, I am like a rasha. What does that mean to be, I am like a rasha? That's not a healthy spot to be in, to always be self-deprecating and saying, no, I'm a nobody. It's not a healthy place. What it's saying is, don't be a rasha. The word is karasha. In Hebrew, that kaf, that k sound before the word rasha, karasha means be like a rasha, which means don't ever be so overly confident in yourself. Realize that it's always a work. Never, and if anything, with the climate we're in now with Corona, if it taught us anything, is we're never fully safe. Our job is never fully secure. The economy is never all in safe, and you can't boast so much where you can't be overly confident. It's more than just humility. It's a good point, Shira, about humility, and I'll tell you even more. It's about never letting your guard down. It's never saying that I have fully arrived. I have made it to the utopia. I've made it to the top. I am above any failure. And I'll say it with a pretty heavy-duty story that most of us perhaps are not familiar with, and it's a little heavy. I'll probably get some backlash or some questions on it, but here's a story. There was this incredible giant of the temple times. He lived during the Second Temple era. His name was Yochanan, simply known, no last name, by Kohen Gadol. Yochanan, the high official. Some of us are familiar with what a Kohen is. Kohen were the representatives. They're called the priests, but it doesn't sound like the appropriate word. They were the officials representing the Jewish people in the temple. But there was one high official. He was known as the Kohen Gadol. Exactly, sure. Never fully arrived. Very good. The Kohen Gadol was the one and only who would go into the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh HaKodashim on Yom Kippur. He was the selected one. He was the holy one. Aaron was the first Kohen Gadol, the older brother of Moshe, and it continued in that lineage of the Cohen descendants. Some of us maybe have friends that have a last name Cohen or even a last name Katz. Is also a Kohanic lineage. Anyway, I won't get into family trees over here, but there was this giant of the temple times. His name was Yochanan Kohen Gadol. Now, unfortunately, besides for him, he was a Kohen Gadol, and it says he went into the Holy Temple, Holy of Holies, on Yom Kippur 80 years in a row. He was a pretty old man, probably started young. I think he lived till 120 or I don't know what age, but he went in 80 times, which was very novel, especially for those days, because going in, if a person wasn't worthy of being the Kohen Gadol and they would enter the Holy of Holies, they would simply expire. They wouldn't be able to handle the holiness of the experience. Their soul was like putting a champagne glass in a microwave. It'll just burst and explode. It's just not fit to receive the power of what's going on there. So unfortunately, during I don't know, and Isabel, I think you're familiar with history, so perhaps you're more familiar with this part of Jewish history. It's a little bit of a sour note. After the around the story of Hanukkah, shortly after that, there was kind of corruption going on in the temple times. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the Romans got in control. And they were the ones governing. They had their governors and mayors and generals in charge of different sections of Jerusalem and Israel. And they still allowed a temple until they destroyed it in 69 and 70 CE. But they were in charge, which means there was corruption going on, and Jews were able to buy their way in to the position that they wanted. So there was sour people, there were people with money, that were influential people, not in a positive way, and we have those people today still, that were able to buy their way into certain positions and get in charge. So Kohen Gadol in the Second Temple time, it was different than First Temple times, but Second Temple times, a lot of them didn't deserve the position. And they got it because they loved the honor that they would be given. And the way they got it was buying it outright for a lot of money and giving it to the Romans. They didn't care who it was. They just wanted their money. But what would happen is every year, there was a new Kohen Gadol because they thought they were the greatest. They would go into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, and they never made it out because they weren't worthy. So the average lifespan of a Kohen Gadol during this period was a 12-month life expectancy. And Yochanan, I just wanted to contrast that. Yochanan Kohen Gadol, he managed to go in 80 years in a row. Does that explain to you a little bit of his worthiness? Okay, listen to what happened then. He, after 80 years, he lost it. He left every part of Judaism. Yochanan, this great Kohen Gadol, 80 years in a row, worthy, he became a heretic. And the word of in the olden days, they were called Sadducees, or in Hebrew, it's called Tzeduki. They were people that didn't believe in Torah. They believed only in the literal meaning of Torah, but not in the oral tradition, and which is the main part of Torah. He became a heretic, opposing every part of Torah. Yochanan Kohen Gadol. Okay, maybe I'm elaborating a little bit too much on it, but that's a story. So there's a Hasidic explanation of the Talmud says he became a Tzeduki, which means he became a Sadducee, which is a heretic. And the reason why they got the name of Tzedukis is because the original heretic during the temple times, his name was Tzadok. That was his name, Tzadok, and he was the original inventor of this style of heresy, believing only in literal Torah. So if this organization, when they had to incorporate with the IRS, with whatever, they incorporated as Tzedukis. That was their non-profit name. And so this Yochanan Kohen Gadol became a Tzeduki. So the Hasidic explanation is, what does it mean he became a Tzeduki? He started considering himself after 80 years. He finally felt, I've got it. He started considering himself a tzaddik. And that was the beginning of his downfall. When he was too overly confident, he was like 80 years in a row. This is world history. This is in the Guinness book. It started getting to him. So 80 years he was worthy. But then he started considering himself too much of a tzaddik. So that's not the term of the Talmud. The Talmud says he became a tzeduki, which was this cult that he joined, opposing Torah. But the Hasidic terminology, understanding it is, the way the Hasidim would say it is, he became a tzaddik. He started looking at himself as all righteous, and that he finally made it. And like Shira is saying, he fully arrived. So anyway, I'm just trying to explain a little bit, understanding now that the Tanya, the original verse, the original quote from the Tanya is, don't consider yourself a tzaddik. Alti tzaddik. B'fnei atzmecha. Tihi beinecha karasha. Look at yourself like a rasha. Don't be literally a rasha, but realize that you have a struggle, and you have to be ready to stand strong in the face of weakness. And that's an incredible thing that we all have to realize. To be that tzaddik level is not on our domain right now. Right now, we're focusing on being a Beinani. And even if we're just a Beinani, that's an incredible accomplishment. And okay, so in other words, it means don't let your guard down. Realize, realize that you need to be, realize that you're vulnerable, and you have to always have your guard on. And you can never rest on your religious morals and say, I've got it, and I'm overly confident. And Yetzer Hara has his ways of getting to you. If you have that guard, he comes to you with excuses, and it comes to you with proving hypocrisy, and he comes to you with one of his greatest weapons, actually, is depression. He puts you in a bad mood. He puts you very heavy on yourself. He finds good excuse to make you do things that you would never otherwise do. Once you name yourself a tzaddik, you are in your ego. Exactly. Very good. He thought he arrived. Exactly. Very well said comments. Okay. So to this point, now we understand that this is something classic that the Alter Rebbe does. He actually understands this from the Talmud. Through using this Zoharic, which is this Kabbalistic understanding and mystical dimension of Judaism, understanding a tzaddik, Rasha Beinani, he actually explains that in the Talmud itself. Because there's one quote in the Talmud where the Rebbe could prove what he's trying to say in its description. We have the greatest sage of almost all times. His name was Rabbah. Rabbah literally means the great one. Everyone called him Rabbah. There was no one like him. To the point where the angel of death, in chapter 1 of Tanya, it says the angel of death couldn't get near him because he was always uttering Torah. So the angel of death had to come up with a plan of how to distract him so that he will be able to get near him, because Torah was protecting him, in order to do his job and take his neshama when the time came. And even at that time, he died with the word tahor on his lips. Tahor means pure. And he was passing away, and the students and the sages, they all had questions that they needed answered on law. So they came to his deathbed and they were asking him questions about leprosy. Is this pure? Is this impure? And he left the world saying the word pure on his mouth. And it was extremely accepted, his verdict, both in our courts, but also in the heavenly courts. They were listening in to what he was saying. Anyway, just that gives you a little bit of a magnitude of understanding who this Rabbah was. And Rabbah himself said, I'm a Beinani. So his student said, where does that leave the rest of us? If you're a Beinani, if you're an average guy, what are we? So that was the question we had in chapter 1. But now understanding what Tanya is describing as a tzaddik and a Beinani, we're understanding that he felt that I can never let my guard down. He felt that I am inspired, but I have my inspiration because I'm always learning Torah and I'm always doing mitzvahs. But what if I stop doing Torah? Because remember I said originally that the Beinani, when he's in a time of prayer, he's feeling like a tzaddik. He's feeling great. He's feeling on a high. He's riding the wave. But what the concern is when he's in a state of poverty, when he's not praying, when he's not on the wave. So the Rabbah was saying, I don't know if I'm a tzaddik yet. I think I'm still a Beinani, meaning I'm only staying in check because I'm always in a state of inspiration, because I'm always praying, because I'm always learning Torah. But if I would stop learning Torah, what would happen to my insides? Will they still be coming out and having that temptation? So the Alter Rebbe is going to say he was mistaken, but just to understand where the depth of where he was coming from, that he was able to confuse himself as a Beinani, is because I'm inspired because I'm learning, because I'm in prayer. But what happens when I stop learning? And he never stopped, so he never was certain in himself, and he never let his guard down. And it is interesting because till now I was saying about the inspiration coming from prayer. And over here I'm saying Rabbah, his inspiration was coming from his Torah study. And it's more parenthetical, but it's an interesting part to it. Let me just catch my breath and drink some coffee. Prayer, and I'm giving a class on prayer on Monday evenings. And Maddie, I really appreciated your feedback the other night when we had our blackout. Prayer we do with the heart. It's actually the verse in the Torah, you shall serve God with your heart. And we learn what is the service of the heart. That's prayer. It never says in the Torah, you shall pray. It says you shall serve God with your heart. And we learn that's the service, the worship of prayer, the workout of prayer. Torah, you study with your mind, like we're doing right now. It's a study of the mind. We're not jumping as we are with excitement. It's more a rigid study and conversation and make sure we don't get distracted. It's not as inspiring as it is when we pray. When we pray with our heart. When we study with our mind. Rabbah is just interesting. Rabbah was able to derive his inspiration through his Torah study. Let me explain that a little more. A lot of times we could study Torah and it could feel really good and we could be inspired by the words. But that's just a dose of Torah. That's like taking Torah in little tidbits and taking a message of the Torah portion that speaks to the heart. But when I'm talking about Torah study, it's a very cold, rigid concentration. To study Torah and analyze the text and derive details from the letters, etc., It's actually a very calm and collected, cold process. You're fully focused. You're not excited about it. You're focused on it. You're putting your mind into it more than your heart. Rabba was able to derive his inspiration in his heart from his Torah study. Point that's more parenthetical. The point of what I'm trying to say is more that the Rabbah confused himself to be a Beinoni because he never let his guard down. Okay, having said that, let's. There's so much more to say, of course, but let's stop it there for now, and let's try to learn a little bit inside. And enough of my own Torah. Let's get to the actual Torah. Okay, I'll bring up the screen on the text if I didn't put you guys all to sleep yet. Always more to learn. Once you name yourself a tzaddik, you are in your ego. Very good, thank you. And I get a thumbs up. Okay, so someone's enjoying it. Good. I'll share my screen if that is okay. Thank you, Maddie. My ego always needs your feedback, so perfect. Okay, whoops. Let's see, is it this? Hold on. No, hold on. Can you see the screen? Hold on, you lost the screen. I'm looking for the Kindle. No, that's my notes. Could you see the screen, the Beinoni's complex life? Do you see that? If someone could.
Yes, we can see it. We can see it. It's good.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so for those that, let me try to make this even bigger. Let me see how to, whoops, no, that didn't help. Okay, I don't know how to make this bigger. Maybe if I go like that, there you go. Okay, we got somewhere. And let me just see, I see a comment here. Oh, hold on. There was a second. Okay, we got it. Okay, so for those that it's helpful to see it on the screen, you're welcome to see it on the screen. We could also, on the actual book, if you have it in front of you, we're on page 152. It's called The Beinoni's Complex Life. We know that all too well. We are all complex, and we'll see what's so confusing about it. But let's see. Section 1, The Beinoni's Default Level. With this insight into the nature of the Beinoni from chapter 12, we can understand the teaching of our sages of blessed memory cited in chapter 1. So now we're going to answer questions all the way from the beginning. In the case of in-betweeners, the Beinoni, both good and bad impulses are their internal judges of what to do or not to do, etc. And that was a quote from the Talmud, meaning that they are guided by their Yetzer Tov, which is their impulse for good, and their Yetzer Hara, which is their impulse to evil. The Talmud cites proof for the verse states, he, which is God, stands at the right hand of the poor person to save him from those that guide his soul. In chapter 12, we discussed how the Beinoni, while torn inside between his two impulses, never allows his Yetzer Hara, his evil inclination, to control his behavior for one moment. With this in mind, we can now appreciate the Talmud's precise choice of wording that the Beinoni has two internal judges, the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara. The Talmud did not say that the Beinoni is ruled by both impulses, which would imply that the Yetzer Hara would actually have some real control over his behavior, meaning he's not being ruled by the Yetzer Hara, God forbid, but merely that the Yetzer Hara judges the Beinoni internally, voicing his opinion. That opinion, however, is never listened to by the Beinoni in practice. So the way it works in Jewish court, there's 3 judges, each one says their opinion, and then you follow the majority. So the judge is not controlling the situation, the judge is just voicing his opinion. So by the Beinoni, the Talmud tells us, he's being judged by both sides, meaning the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is giving his opinion. He's telling you what he wants, he's telling you what he thinks, he's telling you what you should do, but he's not controlling you. The wording is judging you. For as we have seen in chapter 11 and 12, whenever the Yetzer Hara has any control and dominance over the body, which is the small city, even for a short while, we learned, the person is classified as a Rasha at that time and not a Beinoni. Which means if a person is weak, they're a Rasha. They're ready to give in. They're ready to slip. So they for sure didn't give in. but they're still having the impulse to do something that is inappropriate. They're having that inner desire that is inappropriate, that basically is the Yetzer Hara voicing their opinion, judging them, but that's not the final verdict. Rather, in the case of the Beinoni, the Yetzer Hara is merely like, for example, a single, how do you pronounce this word? Magistrate. I'm sorry, you can't see the whole page, right?
Magistrate.
Magistrate, let me just see why you can see.
To judge.
Okay, but hold on. I'm sorry, Isabel, if you're reading on the text, and let me just see where this stopped over here. We can now, okay, so it's a different, where are we up to over here? Okay, perfect. We're on the middle of this page. I'm sorry for not turning the page. A single magistrate, thank you, a single judge on a panel who offers his legal opinion, which however might not become the final legal ruling, being that there is another magistrate or judge who offers a dissenting opinion, and a third judge is required to resolve between them. And the law follows the words of the third reconciliatory view, right? You follow the majority. So if you have one saying this, another saying that, you follow the third judge. That tips the scale. In a similar way, the Yetzer Hara first states its opinion to follow a certain path of self-gratification in the heart's left chamber. Like we learned before, that the heart is the root, the anchor, the source, the hangout spot, the den of the Yetzer Hara. And from the heart, it rises to the brain. It has its wants and it voices its opinion to the brain. And is immediately, to be contemplated. And it is immediately opposed by the second judge, which is the divine soul in the brain, which then spreads to the heart's right side, the place where the Yetzer Hara rests. As we learned in chapter 9, the divine soul has two main locations in the body, the brain and the heart's right side. After rejecting the self-gratifying thought in the mind, the divine soul in the heart's right side then rejects it emotionally as something undesirable. So, and I think I didn't turn the page yet. Let me just stop this for a second. Is that making sense, everyone? Does anyone have any questions on what we've been learning so far? Shir was asking, what's the difference between the animal soul versus the Yetzer Hara, the other side, or the Sitra Achra? Right, exactly. That's actually a very good question. For now, we're going to learn that they're basically the same thing. It comes in different forms. Actually, I would just like to share one story on that. Shir was asking a very good question. I just want to analyze it. It says, there was a chassid. It's a beautiful story. I just have to make sure I get it right. It's been a while since I learned the story. I heard it when I was younger, but there was a chassid who came to the second Chabad Rebbe. Now, Maddie, you know this well. We studied it together in Tanya, and you like this word. One of the main things Chassidus tries to teach us is to be humble. That's actually the word chassid, which is what Chassidic people are. Chassid literally means a pious one. Pious, P-I-O-U-S. That's ultimately our goal. Everything is coming with a reason, and we're not the ones that are in control, and therefore, when something happens to us, we shouldn't get angry, and we take everything with love and with warmth, and we reach out to other people. All that comes from a source of humility, self-abnegation. So it was a thing that was very important by all the Rebbeim, to be humble. And actually, there's also a beautiful letter from our Rebbe, where he was writing, someone like Jews like to do, they kvetched, and there's a Jew complaining about his problems that he has, and I understand that we all have tzaddis and pekalach. So he was saying, Rebbe, and he had it was like a 5-paragraph letter, and he was saying, I don't like my marriage, and I don't like the way my job is, and I don't like my health, a lot of things. And the Rebbe responded with just circling or underlining the first word of every one of his paragraphs. It was I. And he's saying the source of all struggles comes when we magnify our I too much. So a similar story, and Shir, this is to answer your question. It's just a really nice story. I just hope I got it right. Is by the second Chabad Rebbe, the Mittel Rebbe. He was known as the Middle Rebbe, the son of the author of the Tanya. His name was Rabbi Dov Ber. And he rebuked his Hasidim that were a little bit too sure of themselves. And there was a Chassid who had not even a full ego. It was like a sense of self. He started getting to his head, but it wasn't a full-on ego yet. And the Rebbe called him in, and he said, "I want you to know that." And he said, "I don't have an ego. I just have, a little feeling of self." And he says, the evil inclination comes in many forms, in many disguises. Originally, when it first came into the world, it came as a serpent, came as a snake, and it put itself into urging sin. And then that didn't work, so it put himself as the angel of death, which is another story of our Torah. Then that didn't work, and it came as the Satan, the Satan, which is the one that was standing by the Sinai, trying and encouraging us to work on the golden calf. And then we did teshuvah, so his guard was up, and he needed a new disguise. So he came in a different disguise. He came as the evil inclination. But even that, we called his bluff. We took care, we eradicated the evil inclination. So now he has to have a new disguise. So his new disguise was an ego, a yesh is the Hebrew word for it, a sense of self, a feeling of haughtiness. And even that we eradicated from our generation. So the Rebbe, the second Chabad Rebbe, he died in the mid-1800s. He says in the 1820s, he said, now our generation, we're not even, our evil inclination is not even an ego, it's the sense of self. It's the feeling of self. Maybe it doesn't sound so good in the English of it, but a shtik yesh is the word about it. So anyway, it's all the same, it's just in different disguises, Shira. Can you repeat a bit about the brain on the right side of the heart? Is the Satan that you mentioned? What Christianity describes as Satan. I've never heard that before. So, yeah, definitely don't think in Christian terms. I think that's one of the disadvantages. It's beautiful for everyone to be practicing their religion, and the more religion and the more prayer in the world, the better. But what happened is Christianity, and I don't have any beef with anyone, but Christianity took certain things within Judaism. The Pope wears a yarmulke and they have water. All these things came from Judaism. One of the offerings in the temple was actually water. It was once a year on the holiday of Sukkot. It was this incredible celebration. They would pour water on the altar. So water became this holy thing in Christianity, and you could sell it for $1 million. And holy water and sprinkling, it came from the mikvah also, which is a beautiful Jewish mitzvah. And a lot of things are taken into a Christian lens and then almost looked upon within Judaism as, I didn't know we have this. And I get this a lot, like Mashiach. Mashiach is something every single Jew has been waiting for. It's one of the 13 principles of faith. We've died with the words on our lips in the camp saying, I wait for Mashiach in the war, in the Holocaust. But Mashiach now took almost like a Christian lens of second coming and all these things. But it's in Judaism, Mashiach is what all our patriarchs and Moses and Joshua and David and Solomon and the prophets, they all prayed and wished and hoped and dreamed of this time of Mashiach. So Satan is not a pitchfork devil. It's actually coming from Hashem. Hashem to give us free choice and to allow everything to run its course in a way that's fair. Hashem created angels on both sides. So the Satan, it doesn't sound good in English, right? It's the Satan, is the Hebrew, is the form of the Yetzer Hara. It employs the Yetzer Hara to get in us and to do its job. But ultimately, I think we learned this in chapter 9, the last line of chapter 9. We gave a beautiful example of a king who wants to test his son, the prince who's going to in the future be the king, and wants to see if he's strong, if he's ready to be king, what type of character he has. So he tells his son, don't go to a certain place where you could get tempted, and with women, etc. And then the king hires someone to tempt his son. So the woman is being hired by the king to get the son to slip. But of course, the woman doesn't want the son to give in to his temptation. So the woman is in an interesting predicament. She has to do her job loyally because she's a servant of the king. But at the same time, she wants the prince to succeed, so she wants herself to fail. So that's almost like the Satan and the Yetzer Hara. In truth, they want us to do the right thing, but they have a job to do, and they stand there to make it hard for us. But ultimately, you could transform them to be on the greatest possible side. So if the animal soul can be synonymous with the animal, I'm assuming you mean the Satan can be synonymous with the animal soul. Can you explain why the animal soul does good? Why the animal soul does good? Does that mean the Sitra Achra can do a little good? Animal soul, Sitra Achra, yeah. So the animal soul, when you get it on the right side, it could be the most incredible weapon in advancing your Judaism. Because the passion, the joy, the love, the warmth, the excitement, the enthusiasm within your Judaism will come from your animal soul because it's excited. So just get it to want what you want, what God wants, and it could do the most incredible things. So maybe that is a little different than the Satan, because it does sound odd saying that the Satan is on our side. But when you're saying a soul, an animal soul, it makes more sense to say it's on our side. And just also, Maddie, I don't think I fully addressed your question. So the way it is in Tanya is the animal soul hangs out. Its root is from the left side of our heart, which is where the blood gets pumped through. I don't know exactly what chamber it's called, but it's the place where the blood runs through the heart and spreads that to the rest of the body. Blood is the idea of warmth, and it's exactly what the animal soul is. It's the warmth and excitement and passion and temptations that it wants. The mind is more cool and collected and thought through, and what we're learning in Tanya over and over is that the godly soul is based in the mind, and that's where we have the power of the mind controlling the heart. So the animal soul starts from the heart and rises up to the mind to get to what it wants. It starts with a feeling, and then it figures out how to get it. Then the godly soul starts with the thinking, what's important, and thinking of the greater good and selflessness, and working on the heart to get what it wants. So from the mind, it goes to the right side of the heart, which is the place of the godly soul in the heart, the right side. And from there, it battles with the left side, the animal soul, and it wins the war, and it's victorious in getting the animal side not to surrender, but to become an ally. Okay, we'll have to stop the class here. I think we ran overtime. Thank you all for joining. Yiddish class at 12. Tomorrow evening, a nice welcome to Shavuot. On Sunday, if you want to join, you're welcome to join. We're having a good Hebrew reading course that's just for beginners. You can watch the recording of the first class. So far, we have a very nice attendance, and people have been loving it. Learning how to read Hebrew, there's a lot of excitement. You can cross it off your bucket list. Adina gives a really nice Torah and tea that's on Tuesday, and a prayer class is on Monday evening. Be safe, be healthy. We hope to see you soon in good health. Chag Sameach, happy Shavuot, and we'll see each other soon. L'chaim, everyone.